Hello. Don't you love it when technology doesn't work? Okay. Just a few questions to start off. Who here is afraid of heights? Okay. Who here isn't afraid of heights but is afraid of falling and hitting the ground from high heights? Okay. Who here is afraid of talking to girls? Jack. Kidding. I'm kidding, Jack. Okay. Is anyone here, does anyone have arachnophobia, like the fear of spiders? Okay. I did for a long time, and I finally conquered my fear. So my dad let me buy a tarantula. Here, it's in here. It's it's an Australian wing-tipped tarantula. No, I'm kidding. It's from Home Depot. Yeah, I don't have a pet spider. Yeah, okay. So, as you guys can tell, I'm talking about fear today and overcoming fear. So, for a large part of my life, I let every part of my day be run by fear. I would wake up in the morning thinking I'm going to be late for school. I would go to school, I would worry. I would get home, I would worry. Whenever I was at a family gathering, I'd worry. And there's a lot of background as to why. I was naturally an anxious kid. I just worried about everything. And then my parents were getting a divorce when I was in about 3rd grade. So then I started worrying like crazy. Is my family even going to be together in the next year or so? And so that was always on my mind. Then I started an ADHD medication called Adderall. And what Adderall does is most people's brains go like this. If you have ADHD, it goes like this. And so when you have ADHD and they need to stop that, what they do is they give you a medicine called Adderall, and it speeds your brain up so much to where it tires down and slows down. But a side effect of that is stress. So I was dealing with my parents going through a divorce, that stress. I remember I was in elementary school when I started getting this sensation pretty often where I would worry so much that my hands would start shaking and I'd get really hot and I would feel this sensation of like needles going through my hands. And it ended up becoming so common that I felt it all the way up through high school till sophomore year. I would be at like soccer games standing on the sidelines, and then I would just think about something that I have to do that I didn't do that might happen, and I would get so focused on my worry, I would just fix my eyes on fear, and all I could do was think about fear and all of my fears, and I was just mentally broken. So in a lot of our lives, we end up focusing so much on the fear that we can't move forward with anything. And so there's a story in the Bible in Exodus about a guy called Moses. So you have to understand the context of when Moses lived. So it's ancient Egypt. The Egyptians are in power, and the Israelites are slaves. And Moses is an Israelite, so he should be a slave. He got lucky and wasn't. But one day he sees an Egyptian doing something that the Egyptian shouldn't do, being very mean, and Moses gets so mad he kills the Egyptian guy. And then the penalty for killing someone in that time was that you got killed yourself. It was eye for an eye type of society. And so Moses thinks, I am going to get killed. This is horrible. And he focused on his fears, and he thought, what can I do? I can run away. So he runs out into the middle of the desert. So now you have some guy who just killed someone living in the desert, horrible person. He has a stutter, super messed up, basically like the worst person ever. And he like can't be used. But one day he sees a burning bush, and this bush is on fire, but it's not turning to ash, and he hears God's voice through it. And the conversation goes a little something like this. Hey, Moses, you know how you're running away from Egypt and all of your problems? Yeah, I need you to go back there and ask the king of Egypt to set all of his slaves, his most valuable asset, free. And Moses says, you're crazy. And so this is how the story goes. If you open up to Exodus 3:11-14, it says, But Moses said to God, Who am I that I should go to the Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you, and this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship on this mountain. Moses said to God, "Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' What should I tell them?" God said to Moses, "I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you." So right there, what happened was Moses said, "I can't go back to Egypt," and he asked God for his name, and God says, "I am who I am." So in that time, they thought if you had the name of a god, you had power over it. And so what Moses is doing is going, "God, that fear is huge, and I can't face it. All I can do is see it and get scared to death." And God says, "Trust me." Moses says, "No, God, I need your name so I can throw you out my problems, and I can just try to run away." And God says, "No, no, no. Fix your eyes away from the fear and fix them to the Father, and I will teach you how to face your fears the proper way and how to fight them." So Moses goes back to Egypt, and he goes to the king of Egypt, and he keeps 10 times he tells the king of Egypt, "Let my people go." 9 times Pharaoh says no. So that means 10 times Moses just would have been afraid to just say once, "Let my people go." But Pharaoh kept saying no. So God would work through Moses and put a curse over Egypt. And so they kept going back and forth. But what ends up happening is Moses keeps trusting in God, and God keeps using him. Eventually, God sends a curse where all the firstborn sons in Egypt die. And so the Pharaoh says, "Okay, Israelites, get out of Egypt." And Moses leaves. And I would like to say, guess what, guys? Moses faced his fear, and he had no more fears. But what ends up happening is Moses, this guy with a stutter who's killed someone, probably the worst person to lead, ends up leading all of these ex-slaves, thousands of them, out into the wilderness. He ends up having to face a sea, a huge sea. He ends up having to face the wilderness. He ends up having to face other peoples in the land that he's in. But God keeps using him. So in my life, I felt like Moses all the time. There was an Egypt, and if I went towards that Egypt, I was going to die. I was screwed. If I tried to confront anything in my family life, I would get in trouble. And it was so bad that I ended up just acting like Moses. I saw my fears, and I was so frozen I couldn't look at the Father. I just tried to walk away from them and ignore them and hope that they never caught up to me. But God called me to do greater things. He called me to face my fears. So there were multiple times I was struggling with fear and panic, but over time I got better. And I'm not going to say I just stopped being afraid of things. I still felt the fear that I used to, but I would take breaths to calm down. I would focus on my Father. Because when you fix your eyes on the Father, He teaches you to face your fears. Now, I have felt a calling from God to join the military. And for reference, when I felt this call, I was like 125 pounds. I could do like 30 push-ups at a time, and I was pretty small, and I was kind of like the worst person for the military. And I looked at God, and I said, "God, do you see that? I will die if I go there. I have no strength." But God kept telling me, "Liam, I didn't ask you what you thought. No one asked. I asked you to do what I said." And so eventually I did. And I started facing my fears every day. I started confronting my Pharaoh. I had to go and I had to work out. Working out wasn't fun. Running 16 miles at once is not fun. Doing planks until you collapse and then doing another set and then doing another set is not fun. I hated these time trials that I have to do for JROTC where they test you on your strength because it's horrible and it sucks, but I've done it over and over again. And eventually I got to a point where I thought, okay, maybe I am strong enough to face my fears and to make it in the Air Force or Naval Academy. So I applied to both. The Air Force Academy said no. The Naval Academy said yes. But what was interesting was years ago, if I would not have gotten into the Air Force Academy, I would have looked at God and said, "See, in your face, I was right. I am not good enough. I am horrible." But what I felt God calling me to do is I felt like God was saying, "I didn't say that you were supposed to join the Air Force. I want you to go into the Navy," which has a harder boot camp, certain harder things, different challenges. And I said, "God, why can't I just go to a normal college, do normal paperwork, and go have fun on the weekends and do whatever I want and play video games all the time?" And God said, "Did I ask you to?" And I said, "No." And He said, "Well, there you go." So in our lives, we have to confront our pharaohs daily. And so I want to give you guys 2 little tips to confront your pharaohs. Well, this is mostly this is like steps before you even confront your problems. It's just ways to fix your eyes on the Father. So first of all, spend time going 0 miles an hour. And by that, I mean time to slow down your life. Usually what happens is the reason we let fear creep up in our lives is fear is a very loud thing, and it's very toxic and horrible. And so it's super loud, but we crowd our lives with distractions of social media, loud blaring music. We're doing 20 things at a time, and so it gets so loud that the fear blends in and it becomes a part of our normal lives, and we don't even notice it because it becomes a part of us. So when you spend time going 0 miles an hour, spending time in devotion, spending time in silence, just calming your life down, you end up finding out where the fear is, and you can hear it very loud. And so then you can start, whenever you start getting afraid, you realize this is a fear, and now that it's quiet, loud sounds in quiet places are very awkward, from what I found. That's why I'm awkward right now. So when you're hearing this loud sound in a quiet place, it's very awkward, and then it kind of makes your fear almost look silly. And you start to fix your eyes on the Father, and you end up noticing how big your Father is. And when you realize that your God is with you, he is not saying you can just throw him at your problem. He's saying, I'm going to teach you how to face your fears. So the second thing I would say to do is to count your blessings when you're worried. I like to go through my ABCs whenever I get really, really worried because it's very hard. Well, my ABCs of thankfulness when I get really, really worried because it's very, very hard to be worried and thankful at the same time. So it kind of goes something like this. A, I am thankful for apples because they taste good or something. I like food, and food is good, and thank God for apple pie. B, thank you for Pastor Bailey. She is awesome. C, I can't think of a thing that starts with C, so thank you, Pastor Bailey, for being awesome. And so then I get a lot of Pastor Baileys in my thankfulness ABCs, but it works. So both of those things their job is to make you stop looking at your fears and start looking at your Father. When you look at your fears, they seem big. When you look at a problem, it seems like a really big deal. When you realize how big God is, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal. It doesn't seem as large, and it doesn't seem as impossible of a giant. And while your fears may still be big, God calls you to fight them. So I would like to end this sermon with a prayer for you guys because you guys have poured into my life over the last 4 years. And I would like to pray especially for the seniors who have had to face their fears this past year of college, what's next. And dear Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for letting me come up here and be loud for you. Please help me and all of us to start calming down. Help us not to worry, but that you would give us a spirit of joy and of peace. Help us to face the pharaohs in our lives. When we have big problems, we wouldn't just face them once, but we would face them over and over and over and over until they are defeated. And that we wouldn't try to march into our battles alone, but that you would go with us and we would let you live through us. In your name I pray, amen.